What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2017 Fiat 500X Trekking. Huge thanks to Fiat for providing me with this very nice 500X to review for you guys today. So about the 500X, well, this one is bright orange and has a very rounded shape. It kind of looks like a jelly bean or something. It's very fun though. I really have to commend Fiat for going bold, not only with the color offerings for this vehicle, but also just the styling of it. You know, it definitely has some 500 influenced, headlights, and the way that it's designed, it basically looks like 500 on steroids, I think. And I think it does look very cool. It's definitely fun and more eccentric, I guess, as far as styling goes versus a lot of the more conservative crossover offerings in this segment. But I think it actually is pretty fun looking, and it's just very bubbly in every way. The headlights are bubbly, the taillights are enormous for such a small little crossover. The shape of it is very rounded and bulbous, and it's a fun car to look at, I think, honestly. It's a great size though too. It's nice and small and compact, and it's easy to park, things like that, but it's still got plenty of room inside, as I'll show you in a second. Right, for the interior of the 500X, well, it's an interesting mixed bag. Some very good, some not so great. But anyway, first things first, sitting down in these seats. These seats are one of the great things about them. Very nice and soft, brown leather. Again, brown, not for everyone with the orange. I think the color combo does actually kind of work though. But anyway, they're very soft, comfortable seats. I like the silver piping. It's a nice little extra touch. And I like the grain of these seats too. It looks a little rugged, and just a very, very nice looking seating surface here. And it's very comfortable, like I said, nice and soft seats. Average crossover bolstering, so, you know, very mild bolstering, but it does have enough bolstering to hold you in place, you know, whenever you are going around corners, you know, reasonably well. You don't have to brace yourself up against the door or anything like that. And so overall, pretty good seats. Next to the steering wheel in the 500X, which is a little strange. So it's got a flat bottom. It's a nice thick wheel. It's right up there with all the BMW M stuff. But again, we're in a 500X crossover. So I'm not sure why the steering wheel is so aggressive and sporty. You know, I think for the type of people that are going to be buying these, this might be a little overkill, to be perfectly honest. It's also a pretty large wheel. It feels pretty big, you know, in your hands and stuff. And yeah, it could be a little thinner, honestly. It could be a little less sporty, again, for what this is. You know, usually I love beefy, aggressive looking wheels like this, but in a crossover like this, it just doesn't seem to fit totally. But it is a good wheel nonetheless. You know, it's a pretty good 9.3 grip, although you are reaching up a little bit high here because it's so large. You have your typical FCA buttons on the back of the wheel, which are handy for changing your radio track or, you know, volume, and then you have your other buttons here on the front. Very easy to learn and very simple and nicely laid out. Gauges in the 500X are fairly cool, you know, pretty basic, but not bad. So you have, you know, your analog speedometer and tachometer on the left and the right there, and then in the middle there you have a digital cluster that doesn't fill out the whole circle. It's just a little rectangle there, but it does look, you know, good enough. It's got cool 3D graphics there for the digital speedometer you have right there in the middle. It also will give you your other basic information for radio and things like that, you know, trip information, all that good stuff. And so overall, pretty good gauges. Again, I like that they're going for a little bit more of a fun look with the digital speedometer and stuff, and so overall they're interesting to look at. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, you can get, now there's a standard like 3-inch Uconnect touchscreen. This is the 6.5-inch, which is a nicer upgrade, but it is not the full glorious 8-inch Uconnect touchscreen that is in other FCA products. This 6.5 inches is the first time I've had any experience with it, really, and it's okay. It's not as fast as the 8-inch Uconnect. There isn't, you know, a home screen or anything, so you're just jumping from one menu to the next, and you have to pick one menu, which is fine, but it's just a little slow. It's not totally super responsive all the time, and it actually takes a while to sync up to my Bluetooth, and sometimes it'll be like a full minute before it's actually connected to my phone and starts Bluetooth audio streaming for me. So a little bit of a lag there. Otherwise, though, the audio system, this is the standard. It's not the Beats audio or anything, and this stereo though is pretty good. Again, for a standard stereo and a $20-something thousand crossover, it's actually a pretty good sounding stereo, so I have to give it that. But this infotainment system isn't the greatest. It doesn't have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto either. You have to go up to the 8-inch screen in other FCA products in order to get that, but you know, it does a pretty good job with what it has here, and so overall, you know, not the greatest, but not the worst either. And then coming down, you have 2 vents, and then you have your 3 knobs here for climate control that do feel pretty nice. You know, have some little bit of metal feeling material. Might be plastic, might be metal, I'm not sure. But they have that there. And very easy and straightforward with the way that's laid out. And so they did a pretty good job overall. It looks nice with the gloss piano black finish as well. And then you have your auxiliary jack and USB jack right beneath that. You do have another knob here behind the shifter, and that is for your drive modes. And so there's normal, sport, and then traction plus, which, you know, helps in slippery conditions. And it's nice to have the little selector, but it's a little slow to respond. And sometimes I have to hold it in the desired position for like a second or two before it actually registers that that's the drive mode that I want. So it's not very easy to quickly switch between them, but it's nice to have nonetheless. And it's a nice feeling little knob here as well. It's a little wiggly, you know, not the highest build quality, but it has, you know, some metal trim on it and overall looks good. But while we're talking about materials, that's really the most interesting thing about the 500X is inside here. So just starting in the doors here, you have very hard, rough plastic up top, but then you go down and it's this super soft brown leather that is really nicely padded, wonderful for resting your elbow on, feels like you're sitting in a leather couch, and is like probably the most padding I think I've seen on a door, to be perfectly honest, period. I don't remember a time when there was a more heavily padded door. So that is nice. So it's like super nice here, super bad here. And then coming over to the center, it's the same type of thing. So you have, you know, some nice metal trim rings around things. You have these glass buttons for some of these buttons here, or it feels glass. Maybe it's, you know, nicer plastic, but nice buttons, you know, as far as for the radio and stuff goes. But then the whole dashboard is this rough, like stone finish for this plastic. And it's so rough, I swear you could like sand something down with this. So if you ever wanted sandpaper on your dashboard, this car is for you. Again, you're not touching the dashboard, so it doesn't really matter. And it does look cool as far as a visual, you know, perspective goes. But, you know, touching it, it's just the roughest dashboard I've ever felt in my life. And so again, just kind of a strange design choice. There's interesting design choices all over the place in this car. You have your typical assortment of plastics that, you know, around the shifter here feel pretty cheap. And then you go back a little bit, and then you have some very nice metal trim here that's hanging out, and that is really great and nice to see some metal trim here in a vehicle that is you know, of this price category. And then, like for example, the shift boot is held on by a button for the leather shift boot here, and so just kind of interesting choice. Again, I guess it's a little sportier looking, but to only be held on by a button is again an interesting choice. And so yeah, I mean, those are the main things, you know, but just some places, like I said, you know, very nice as far as the upholsteries and stuff goes, but then some of the plastics are rough. But then you even have like metal door handle pulls that are like actual metal, they're sturdy, feel great. So there's like some parts of this interior that are like 10 out of 10, and there's others that are like 2 out of 10, you know, just like a lot of extremes in this car. It's very polarizing, much like the exterior. You know, it's polarizing in every way, and I guess that's kind of the intent that they had, is they wanted to, you know, be more visually interesting than all the competition out there that's bland, the same black plastic, the same types of materials. This switches it up, and if that's what you're looking for, then this is the vehicle for you. As far as storage space in the 500X, it is very good though. That's one thing they did a great job with. First off, in the doors here, you have a very large pocket that has a huge bottle holder. I mean, you could fit almost a quart of milk in that door pocket, so very interesting there, and very great. And then coming over to the center, you have a nice deep center cubby that has a power outlet, and like I mentioned, the auxiliary and USB jacks are right up front there, so nice to have those. And then you have 2 cup holders here towards the back, and then you have the center armrest, which again is nice and softly padded, nice and thick, feels great. And then you open that up, and then you have a very deep little center cubby here that has another USB jack in there, and all kinds of space. I mean, I got sunglasses way down in there, which goes to show you just how deep it is. And so overall, just a ton of space in there too. Backspace in the 500X is about on par with most of these small crossovers. I'm 5'9". Me sitting behind myself, I got about 2 inches to spare, and then about, you know, 2 or 3 inches there of headroom. Headroom is no problem, obviously being a boxy, you know, SUV. But as you can see with the passenger seat position, if you were on the taller side, you would be really fighting for back seat space there. So, you know, if you are on the taller side, you might want to go for something bigger than this. But for those that are, you know, like I said, under 6 feet tall or whatever, you should still have a pretty usable back seat there. Trunk space in the 500X is also pretty good. So it's a little interesting. First off, you can see the standard storage area there, and it looks a little shallow. And I'm like, wow, I wonder why it's, you know, so shallow. Good amount of space there though. Still folds down, you know, for the rear seats, so you can load stuff in there that's larger than that actual hatch area. But you can lift up that floor there, and then you have an extra layer of division and a bunch of extra space in there, and you can slide that cover lower, and then you see you have a very deep cargo space there. And then that's not all. You can open up what's underneath that, and that's where you would usually find a spare tire or something, although in this car it's just the typical pump and fix a flat can like you more often see now in cars these days. But anyway, there's all those other little pockets in there that you can put stuff in. And so all things considered, it's really a lot of space, a very versatile space, and overall it's a very well done job there. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The 500X has your typical FCA key. This is similar to the one, exactly the same as the ones in the Dodges and whatnot. Just has a little Fiat emblem there. Now it has a nice weight though. It's a nice key, and it's keyless entry and push button start here. The 500X Trekking edition at least. So anyway, you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off in the 2017 Fiat 500X Trekking. It's important to note this one that I'm driving is front wheel drive. You can get all wheel drive as an option here on the Trekkings, but this one just has the front wheel drive, and it does a pretty good job so far. I have been driving this car for about 130 miles already, so I figured I'd give you guys a little bit of all my impressions of what it's been like to drive here over the past few days already. One thing that stands out is the first time when you're backing out of your driveway and you put it into drive, it always takes a split second before it actually starts going. I have to hit the gas and always wait like a full count, 1 second or 2 seconds before it actually gets into gear and starts going. That's something I've discovered with this 9-speed and other Fiat Chrysler applications as well. They all kind of use the same transmission. So just an interesting thing to note there about that. Other things to note here though, just driving here, visibility is excellent in the 500X thanks to, you know, the very bubbly shape that it has. Large windshield you can see through very easily. Huge side windows that are very easy to see out of. View out of the back is the only thing because you have those headrests there that kind of obscure your vision a little bit, but still pretty easy to see out of the back. But let's turn down onto this back road here real quick and see how it does. So this one, now there's two different engine options here for the 500X. This is the 2.4 liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine. It has 180 horsepower and 175 pound-feet of torque, and it is the more powerful engine option, but it's not the fastest engine option, which is an interesting conundrum. So with this engine, this car does 0 to 60 in 9 seconds, so it's on the slow side. I wouldn't say that it feels that slow. 9 seconds, 0 to 60 sounds like just an antique, but you know, whenever you are on the highway and stuff, you do have sufficient passing power. It does have to drop it down a couple of gears, and this engine does have to work fairly hard to get up to speed sometimes, but overall it doesn't feel painfully slow. Again, it's no sports car, but it's plenty to get you around town. But anyway, like I said, there's two engine options here. The other engine option is a 1.4 liter turbocharged engine, which sounds amazing, by the way. It's the same one available in the Dart and in the 500 Abarth and stuff, and it's a really cool sounding engine. And in addition to that, it's also the faster engine, because that one you can actually even get with a manual transmission, and that combo of a manual and that 1.4 liter turbo, it will actually do 0 to 60 in 7.8 seconds, and so it's over a full second faster, 0 to 60, and that only has 160 horsepower, but it still has 174 pound-feet of torque while being a lot lighter, you know, being a full 1 liter smaller than just having a little turbo there. So yeah, very interesting little comparison there between the two. So it just depends on what your preference is, but I gotta say it's really cool they actually even offer this in a manual transmission. It's very fun considering a lot of its competitors do not have a manual option, so that's some extra additional feather in the cap of the 500X here. But anyway, now that we're, you know, just cruising on a main road here, it's a very nice thing to cruise down the road in. The engine is a little buzzy sometimes, again, depending on how much power you need. The side mirrors, there is a little bit of wind noise too, especially when you get up to some higher speeds, that it almost sounds like the windows cracked. That's how loud the wind noise around the mirrors can be sometimes. So I wouldn't say it's the most refined vehicle, but again, you're talking about a mid-20-something thousand dollar crossover, and so, you know, not super surprising there, but I think there is some better refinement than some of the others. One thing I will say about this 9-speed automatic, aside from its, you know, flaw of being a little slow to get into drive there, is that it actually is pretty smart and intelligent about maximizing the engine that you have and you know, trying to get the most power out of it. It doesn't waste any time with downshifts. It gives you the high RPMs you need if you're really flooring it and want to, you know, get moving. It'll do that for you. So it is, like, see this, it's holding the gear. It's not trying to upshift. It's just like, all right, you want to go nuts, go for it. And so I will say the 9-speed is very willing as far as, giving you what you're looking for. And so overall, it's not all bad here with this 9-speed automatic. It is a pretty good transmission in a lot of ways. But we're coming up to a back road here. I put the car into sport mode, and let's see how it handles. These weigh a little over 3,000 pounds, maybe almost 3,100 pounds. And there's that transmission giving me that high RPM. But yeah, so it's a decent handling thing. Now, this is based on the same platform as the Jeep Renegade, and I will say that in some ways it's better set up than the Jeep Renegade as far as handling goes. Other ways, it's not quite as good. So side-to-side handling, whenever you're steering and stuff. Again, we're talking about a small crossover here. It's not a sports car, not even close. It's also not on the greatest of tires. These are Nexen 215 wide tires, which I would think they would put some more of a name brand tire on these things. But anyway, that's what this is running, so I think that also may be part of the reason why this doesn't feel like a super grippy setup, but it does do a decent job. Brakes also feel pretty good as you're hauling them down to a stop. But that's one of the interesting things about this, is if you really slam on these brakes, there's a good amount of nosedive. It's kind of dramatic, honestly, and more so than most cars that I've tested. I honestly can't remember the last car that nosedived as much as this one did. But again, how often are you doing a full ABS stop? And that's usually pretty dramatic anyway. So if there's a little bit of nosedive, I don't think it's the end of the world. Again, I wouldn't pick this as an autocross companion, but for just getting around, I think most people aren't going to be bothered by it. And I think the handling is plentiful, for your average, running errands and doing all that kind of stuff. But yeah, like I said, these tires do give up the grip pretty quickly, and so it doesn't instill a ton of confidence. You got to take it a little bit slower, but I do think it has a little bit of a higher limit as far as handling goes versus the Jeep Renegade. That had some fairly low handling limits. It made that car a little more fun as well and playful, because it was just swaying from side to side. It was just all part of the fun of it, and that also felt a little taller. This feels a little more trimmed down here with the 500X, so it feels a little sportier, I guess, in that regard. But other things to note here, the steering weight is actually good. The feeling of the wheel is pretty numb. You don't really feel much going on through the front wheels, but it is a nice weight. Not super light, not super heavy. It's nice and right in the middle there. Maybe even a little too heavy, possibly, again, for this being a non-sporty vehicle. But I like that they're going for the sporty feeling with the thick, beefy wheel, and the steering weight matches that wheel, I think. But overall, it's pretty good. You might have seen there, you heard the engine starting to accelerate, but you didn't actually see me move for a split second. That's what happened when I went from reverse to drive. But anyway, we'll take off again here. And since this is the front-wheel drive version, this engine does like to yank at these front wheels whenever you have the wheels turned a little bit and you request full acceleration like that. But I'm getting up to speed just fine here, as long as you're not scared of some higher RPMs. It's plenty of power to get you up and moving. But I would be very curious to try that manual transmission with the turbo one. I think that would be probably the one to pick for the enthusiast. But yeah, I've been driving the 500X for a few days now. I put 137 miles on it so far, and two little things about it that are not so great are the turn signal stock. It's just a cheap sounding turn signal, and I don't want to nitpick about dumb little things, but when you hear that, for a good amount every day when you're daily driving this thing, it's just, it sounds a little cheap, to be perfectly honest. Again, it's a turn signal sound. It's either a big deal or it's no deal at all, depending on, your personality type, I suppose. But just something to mention. Another thing to mention is that the rear hatch, every time I went to close it, it like flops, and it almost feels like it's not fully closed, like you didn't push it down hard enough, or you didn't shove it hard enough. But it's always closed every time. It's never been open, but it never feels like it's fully secure. And I think that's just the latch, the way they had it set up. But again, just another quirky little thing about this vehicle. But this thing does pretty good fuel economy. Since I've been driving 137 miles here so far, my average miles per gallon has been 26.6. So not bad for a car that is over 3,000 pounds, and this little engine that's working super hard fairly frequently. I'd say about 50% of my driving was done on the highway, but I think it's pretty decent fuel economy, again, for something that's higher off the ground like this is and whatnot. But the EPA actually rates these at 22 in the city, 30 on the highway for a combined average of 25. So for me to be getting 26.6 is really impressive, because it often seems like on most of my press vehicles that I have, they struggle to get even the city number whenever I'm driving them around. So for this thing to be getting over the combined average is pretty impressive. Again, I'm not driving this thing gently either. I'm revving this thing out and, you know, flooring it whenever I need to pass people on the highway and stuff. I'm not messing around with this engine, and it still is returning pretty good fuel economy. So I have to say, you know, if you want something that's, you know, thrifty on gas and actually does the numbers that the EPA claims it does, this one does it. So that's pretty impressive. A lot of these other smaller turbocharged ones, you lean on that turbo and it just sucks down gas. So this naturally aspirated motor does a pretty good job, I think, for, you know, again, what it has to work with here. The last thing I want to touch on here is the price of the 500X. Now, these start at the base model, I think, is just under $20,000. This is the Trekking model, which is the next step up from the base trim, which is Pop. So there's another trim above this as well. But so this Trekking one is still really nicely equipped. Doesn't have heated seats, you know, some of the basics that you might expect on a mid-level trim car, and you can add some of those on as options. This one, though, the Trekking starts in the like mid $23,000 range, and this one, as tested, I'm driving is $28,410. So a good leap up. That, I mean, I got the blind spot monitoring, you know, all the driving assistant aids and all that kind of stuff, which is nice. Like I said, the screen is upgraded to the 6.5 inch. You have the auto climate control, the automatic, the bigger engine, all those types of things, you know, add up to that $28,000 price. And since this is one of the hottest segments currently on the market, you know, there's tons of competitors to choose from, and, you know, they all have their strengths and weaknesses and, you know, advantages as far as pricing or, you know, quality and all that kind of stuff goes. But I gotta say that this is the fun option. I think this is the one for those that want to be bold, want to stand out, don't want to blend in with all the other, you know, ho-hum crossover offerings out there that are everywhere, and everyone drives the same ones. You know, if you want something that's, you know, fun to look at, comes in fun colors, all that kind of stuff, I think this is certainly, you know, the one to pick. It's a nice driving vehicle. You know, there isn't too much road noise other than, like I said, the wind noise there on the mirrors, but it's a soft, smooth riding car. You know, it's been comfortable here for the past 130 miles to cruise around in it. And yeah, I mean, you know, I like sports vehicles and stuff, so driving a small crossover isn't the most fun thing for me personally, but for those that want something like this, you know, just want something to run around town in, I think this is a really fun option. And you know, like I said, it has a few imperfections. It's not the greatest in every regard, but overall I think it's a pretty cool you know, offering here by Fiat, and well worth checking out. So anyway, let me know your thoughts about the 500X in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.